Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just going to give it a few minutes to let folks join, but we are here for the Conducting Success webinar. So we're just going to give it a minute or so to let folks join, and then we'll be ready to get started. Thanks for joining us. For those of you just joining, welcome to the Conducting Success webinar. We'll be getting started in just about another minute or so, just to allow folks to get in, get comfortable. Feel free to grab yourself a cup of coffee, cup of tea, cup of water. Hydration's important. There you go. Giuliano's on top of it. We're so thrilled to have you here, and we're going to be getting started in just a moment. All right, I've given folks 2 minutes to join. I feel like everyone's in the room that's going to be joining us, so why don't we get started? So hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, which is Conducting Success, How to Drive Revenue and Transform Change into Opportunity at Your Organization. My name is Bethany. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Strategic Brand and Sector Engagement Lead here at Spectrix. My role centers around being immersed in the arts and cultural sector that we're all so lucky to be a part of. The best part of my job, in my humblest of opinions, is bringing people together, whether it's in person or virtually like we all are here today. I've spent over 15 years working in various facets of our industry, from box office to audience service departments, marketing teams, even a moment in fundraising and then advertising at organizations across New York City before I joined Spectrix back in 2019. Today, I am absolutely pleased to be joined by two wonderful industry leaders, Giuliano, the CEO at Sacramento Philharmonic and Opera, and Vanessa, the Vice President and General Manager at Live Arts Toledo. They have both been so generous with their time and will be sharing their experience from their home organizations shortly, and I'll allow them each to properly introduce themselves. I don't want to do them any injustices here today. Here's a quick breakdown of how we'll be using our time together today. I'm briefly going to wrap up our introduction. I'm then going to hand the mic over to Giuliano to share the story of how Sacramento Philharmonic and Opera transformed their approach to take advantage of opportunities to better serve their audiences and the growth that enabled at their organization. Then we'll hear from Vanessa on the approach Live Arts Toledo has taken to their continued investment that's aligned their cross departments and being able to unlock success from that alignment. And then I'll summarize high-level thoughts here that have been shared via their stories and from themes that we're hearing across the industry. Then we can conclude with my favorite part, which is the Q&A. So as you're hearing the stories and the topics that are shared today, please feel free to drop any questions, thoughts, or feelings into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. For any questions that we may not be able to get to before our time runs out here together, we'll be sure to reach out to you and get those questions answered. So feel free to drop those in when inspiration strikes. Before we embark on our discussion here today, I want to just give a quick background as to who we are at Spectrix and why we're having this conversation. Spectrix was established back in 2007 by two software developers who had a shared passion for arts and cultural experiences. At the time, they were experiencing firsthand the limitations of ticketing software as it was attempting to catch up with the internet age, and they felt they could do better. So they developed Spectrix, a holistic ticketing, fundraising, marketing, and CRM solution built for arts and live entertainment professionals in the UK, the US, Ireland, Canada, and now Australia and New Zealand. Equally important to our market-leading technology, we are a mission-focused organization. Essentially, our purpose is to ensure that organizations can save their team's time, strengthen their ability to focus truly on what's most important. That's reaching and engaging a widest possible audience for each of those organizations. Personally, I'm very proud to be part of such a mission-driven team that deeply believes in making a difference in our sector, as evidenced in part by our B Corporation certification status we achieved a few years ago. Our team has a truly global perspective of the opportunities and challenges that are presented in our sector from the work that we do with our rapidly growing client base of over 850 organizations and the over 20,000 ticketing and arts administration professionals that are utilizing Spectrix each week. Having the opportunity to work with and learn from all of these different organizations means that we understand the challenges and the opportunities that you're faced with. And then we design and build on Spectrix to support the ways in which you bring music and audiences together. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and pass the mic over to Giuliano to share a bit more about Sacramento Philharmonic and Opera. So Giuliano, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bethany. Hi, everyone. Great to be with you here today. Like Bethany said, my name's Giuliano Kornberg. I am the CEO of the Sacramento Philharmonic and Opera. I've been here for about 10 years now, which is a little hard to believe, but we're still having fun every day, which is great. And I really am excited to be here to share a bit of a high-level overview of how the Philharmonic and Opera really has been able to focus on customer-centric marketing, really ultimately to sell more tickets and secure more earned ticket revenue than we have before, which I think everybody would certainly like. So if I think back to 23, 24, about a few years ago, that's when the SPNO was really starting to kind of coalesce in terms of who we are today. The artistic and the programmatic quality really was starting to increase quickly. We had a new principal conductor, like essentially a de facto music director that the musicians loved. We had a group of donors who were really invested in our work. We have the I guess, privilege of doing both philharmonic or orchestra and opera productions. So we really were gaining kind of more internal capacity of how to produce opera. So we were having a lot of gains on the artistic and the fundraising side. But with that, what we realized is that the ticket sales and kind of the patron experience around it was lagging a little bit comparatively anyway. It's not that the SPNO staff, marketing box office, didn't have like the capacity or the skill set to actually do the work and sell the tickets. What we found is we just didn't necessarily have the right systems or platforms in place to really efficiently sell as many tickets as possible. I'll try not to name names, but at the time we were using a database, purchase platform, things like that, that was operated or owned almost in a sense by the city of Sacramento. That was connected through our main performing arts venue, the Safe Pack or the Safe Credit Union Performing Arts Center. It was free to use, and as I say, free 99 is always nice. But what we found is that there really were a lot of inefficiencies with using the system. Kind of at its core, processing tickets was pretty excruciating, I would say. We basically had to process, all tickets, single tickets, three packs, four packs, subscriptions, things like that, in like a 30 to 35-year-old kind of way old backend system, which really made each transaction take an inordinate amount of time and have our box office staff kind of get, bogged down with the minutia of like processing tickets as opposed to like sell. The database that we were using really didn't have any subscription functionality, which for us is important. We subscribe about 60% more or less of the house. So selling season tickets is a big part of what we do. And given the fact that this database and kind of purchase platform didn't have any functionality for subscriptions, we had to kind of put together this somewhat wonky jerry-rig system, a lot of manual work, a lot of time, very clunky, kind of combining, our website and the purchase platform to actually like get orders out the door and process tickets, which obviously wasn't great. We couldn't sell exact seats for any of our tickets. Which I think is kind of incredible that we had so many people buy tickets, but there was a lot of faith that they put into us without knowing like what specific seats they knew they were going to get. So that was frustrating for patrons. Data was messy coming out of the platform, which meant that reporting was messy. Their support team wasn't great. We were kind of on our own in terms of fixing problems and troubleshooting because we just couldn't talk to anybody. And probably worst of all, just given everything with the old system, patrons really started to resent it, which means that even though they knew that when they went to a concert they would like it, they really started to think negatively of the Philharmonic and Opera, which was not good. Quite a few of them actually would give us a call and say, "Hey, I bought a ticket and I'm excited to come, but the experience was terrible. And because it was so hard to buy a ticket, I probably won't come again to the Philharmonic and Opera," which, considering patrons are the lifeblood of all of our organizations, that's obviously not ideal. So, given all that, we really were faced with a bit of a crossroads, and we had to decide, on the one hand, given that the system is free, which again, free is awesome if it works, were we going to try to continue on with this platform and trying to do what we could to make it work and keep the free? Or on the other hand, would we really kind of step back and think about what we actually wanted out of how patrons feel about the organization, what that patron engagement experience is, and then if we had to invest in the technology, we could. We chose the latter, which hopefully most organizations would do. And after brainstorming with marketing and box office and development, kind of other organizational stakeholders, we came up with like a bit of a mini list of non-negotiables that we really wanted to make sure we have or had as we explored a new database, CRM, and ticket platform. So, kind of at its baseline, what we wanted was a smooth patron buying experience for patrons where they could just go online, start from step one, kind of go through the process and just like make it easy for them to buy tickets. We also wanted an efficient ticket selling process on the back end rather than coding up for, again, up to 10 or 15 minutes for a complex order. Really have staff just take like a minute or two to complete a transaction so that they could continue on with their work. Given that the reporting was a bit of a mess in the old database, we really wanted to make sure that going forward we would have like really solid and almost customizable reporting that we could pull easily and quickly and that could spit out real or data in real time so we could make like actual decisions. Having a support team that wanted to help and provide assistance, that was really important. As I said, being able to sell season tickets, considering just the percentage of our performing arts center that is on subscription, that was a really important part of the kind of overall picture. Obviously, better integration between selling tickets and our website. That was kind of mission critical considering how clunky our old system was. And again, even more in general, just moving away from this old database that patrons really started to dislike. At the time, we were still pretty young. We came back as a merged organization in 2015. It took a few years to kind of get our footing, and then 2020 happened. So there were quite a few fits and starts, I'd say, just in general. So we really had never done this sort of thinking before about a specific area like ticket sales. So kind of, where are we going from a patron perspective? We really had to think about it. And considering just this desire to have these patrons who, again, are so existential to what we do, have as good experience as possible, we realized that, kind of making an investment, figuring out these non-negotiables really was something that we had to do just in order to ultimately sell more tickets and, get more revenue and invest in this patron experience. So we ultimately moved to Spectrix. A note about the city, because again, the old database and the Performing Arts Center was using, or the Performing Arts Center and the city, like that's connected. So we're using their venue. They were great partners through this whole process. I was a little worried going into it that by us saying, hey, we're moving away from your database to our database, they might kind of sour on the Philharmonic and Opera. And it took a couple conversations for them to understand kind of the full implications of why we were doing this. But they were great. They've been committed to our success. We kind of structured a little bit of a revenue sharing deal on like a very small percentage of what we do that kind of works for everybody. So it's been great with the city. They were pretty much with us every step of the way as we made this transition. And considering we're in their venue, that's important. So, given this list of non-negotiables that we came up, really the next step was we matched them up with a whole host of prospective or potential kind of databases for us. And after doing, quite a bit of work and study and cost analysis and things like that, we ultimately concluded that Spectrix, which is why we're all here today, was going to be the best system for us. Without having it sound too much like a sale call or sales pitch, although I certainly love Spectrix, really leveraging the technology that Spectrix had or has holistically really did allow us to do pretty much everything we wanted from a ticket selling perspective. It was way easier and more efficient to sell tickets and packages, which again could allow us to move through calls more quickly. We could make more outbound calls. We could be more sales focused. We could have more pleasant conversations where we're chatting as opposed to just, hey, please hold while I process your tickets, which obviously enhanced, by quite a bit, patron confidence in the SPNO. We were able to transition kind of out of this wonky put together of our website, an old ticket base, to Spectrix Link, which is kind of the plug and play, ready to rock and roll purchase path connected to Spectrix, where everything is integrated. And again, it's a much more smooth experience for patrons to buy tickets through that. The reporting in Spectrix is great. It's easy to pull customer lists or reports. We can customize things on our end on our own to be able to pull stuff and take out data and make like really valuable real-time decisions about strategy and growth and what we want to do for a specific thing. The support team has been great. If we have a question about functionality or something that we're not quite sure how to do, or can we even do something, we've always found it really efficient and nice and great to talk to the support team. So that's been wonderful. Um, by going with Spectrix kind of down the road, it kind of coincided with we just did a lot, or we were starting to do a lot more kind of targeted marketing to specific groups of patrons and do some more A/B testing and focus on more community groups or even like artistic groups like musicians or chorus singers, things like that. We really found that in Spectrix, it was very easy to create different promotions and offers and promo codes, which for maybe a different group of people who otherwise maybe wouldn't necessarily engage with us, we found that that was like a barrier to entry that we were able to get rid of by kind of leveraging the Spectrix technology. We ultimately purchased our own like tickets and scanners, which is kind of a no-brainer. But having our own stuff as opposed to like borrowing or even renting other people's stuff really was nice, just in terms of us having more agency over just like our things that we needed to actually sell tickets. Dot Digital is basically like the MailChimp of Spectrix. That's been great from the kind of email automation perspective. So we can set up different templates of pre-concert emails and post-concert emails and just general communications with patrons. And it's much more automatic as opposed to manual. So that frees up a lot of our kind of staff time to focus on what they can do best as opposed to churning through emails consistently. And now that we're more comfortable with the system, we can use it for other things. Like we work with Vatic for dynamic pricing now that, we're a little more enmeshed with Spectrix. We work with Feather for digital marketing, kind of in a similar vein now that we're more into Spectrix. We're going down the path of using Spectrix payments. So we're kind of getting towards like a using the one system that we have to do essentially everything that we want to do from a ticket and earn revenue and kind of broader revenue perspective, which has been really great for us. I will say also, we try to be really smart about how we course this out. And we really did kind of, use Spectrix in steps. So considering how important the subscription revenue aspect was for us, we really started or wanted to make sure that, okay, step one was to get season tickets kind of humming by using the system. Then step two was great. Now that we can sell season tickets, let's make sure that this, like the mechanics and the technology around selling single tickets is locked in. Great. We've got that locked in. Step three then was let's utilize other kind of related technologies that can connect with Spectrix, that can make our lives better, which now we did. And then now step four is kind of utilizing more of the back end kind of payments perspective just to keep everything in one place. And for us, that worked. Looking back, we probably could have gone a little more quickly at the beginning, but I think we all wanted to really make sure that we just like had a full sense of what the system was and really kind of triangulate. Yeah, we have a list of 6 or 7 negotiables, but like what's the most important thing that we really had to focus on? And we were just fortunate that by going with Spectrix, we could do kind of everything every step of the way. So really the results for us have been great. In 23, 24, 3 or 4 years ago, we were at about $450,000 in ticket sales. We just finished the 25-26 season, just shy of a million, about 990,000. And I think doubling revenue was cool. We were thrilled. We went from being thrilled to sell, 60 or 70 grand a concert to now we're pretty consistently averaging over $100,000. We've had some double concert sets where we've sold upwards of, 250 or $260,000 in revenue. So the results have been there. But I really think like those results wouldn't have happened if we didn't kind of do that legwork at the beginning to really come down or create kind of this list of, okay, what do we want out of the patron engagement experience? This is where we want to end up, and then kind of really think about and be okay with investing in the process of how we got there. For us, it's Spectrix. And we've tried to be as curious as possible to continue using kind of our system to make it suit our needs. And really, that kind of holistic work, I would say, has made the difference in our success. Again, the results to me kind of speak for themselves. So it's really fun for me to be here and talk about kind of, us as a bit of a test case in terms of like how we got there. Because it really has made our lives and my life, a lot easier. And certainly with the kind of ticket revenue results, we can just do more and produce more cool art for Sacramento. So like I said, certainly happy to be here, and happy to share a little bit about how we got here. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Giuliano. And just a massive, I can see some of the emojis coming through about others celebrating your success of the wildly impressive doubling of your revenue after you took on this large piece of work. One question I had for you is, I imagine, as you said, the free 99 approach that you had previously
Sure.
before you came over to be in partnership with us. I imagine that having that initial conversation with stakeholders wasn't possibly the easiest thing to do when you're proposing, going from something that was wildly inexpensive to making an investment in what you were looking to do and how you were looking to evolve the organization. Can you sort of share any tips or tricks or sort of strategies that you use to open up that conversation since it was clearly so successful in both this proposal as well as when you're sort of negotiating the other elements with the city?
Sure, sure. So our staff was pretty on board with this from the beginning, especially, the folks who were kind of working with the old ticketing database because they were like, oh, easier life, yes, please. I had quite a few conversations with the board because obviously, like given my role, I do quite a bit of work with the board, and there were some conversations about budgeting and actuals and well, how much money are we really going to make with this? But I think what ultimately kind of not convinced them, but I think made kind of my superiors more comfortable about it was essentially kind of what I just said was look, like even if we take a little bit of a hit from a cost perspective in the short end, what'll make us most successful for the long term is really instilling a lot of patron confidence. And it might take, a year or two to have everybody really get comfortable with the system. That's why we kind of started off like somewhat slowly, I would say. But, after a year and a half or 2 years, kind of a full cycle of selling season tickets and single tickets, this bet that we made and that I kind of shared with the board that people will ultimately really feel more confident in the Philharmonic and Opera because now they see that the entire process of buying a ticket to like going to the concert and enjoying the art form that they bought the ticket for, like it's going to lead to kind of more better results in the future from a revenue perspective and also from a how are patrons feeling perspective. And I guess fortunately for me, like it didn't take kind of very long for the board to get that. They also had their own frustrations with the old database. So like they were kind of they had like a personal story. Oh yeah, like we have to move off the system. And if you
Yeah.
think the cost is worth it, so, and kind of tied to another question that somebody asked about kind of messaging and targeting, we were spending so much time just like figuring out how to build a system that like could work for us. Once we had the kind of better technology that could do that for us, we just had a lot more time to figure out, well, what is the overall message for orchestra, for opera, for this artist, for this group of community members, for, these lap subscribers, for these donors, right? And then we could just had a little more time and capacity to just like try things out and test things out and see if there was a particular message that stuck or landed better with certain groups of people. That also like for the board, when I said, hey, like if we do this, we can focus on like more communication and storytelling and narrative building and kind of getting people excited about what they're going to see. And the board was like, oh yeah, that's great. So hopefully that kind of answers both questions. And again, it took a few conversations to again, not convince, but just kind of help the board kind of understand why this investment was an investment as opposed to just like a cost, right? And I think
Absolutely.
pretty quickly they saw it. And again, I think the results kind of speak for itself now. So or
Yeah,
themselves.
and I think your approach of having a really clear direction of what you were trying to achieve, of that more customization, I think at times folks can sort of feel like, oh, taking on more, whether that's leveraging new pieces of technology or being more sophisticated in your approach, is simply just going to take more time. Whereas you've proven out at your organization that even by taking the operation in-house, you were able to be more sophisticated, but also freed up time. Is that fairly true across the board at your organization that by using the tools, you're having more time to trial out messaging and strategies?
Yeah, I would say so. And, there was definitely a learning curve in terms of like
Absolutely.
just learning all this new technology and figuring out the reporting and figuring out the processes that could work for us. That's why I think it was nice that the staff from kind of day one were, yes, let's do this. Because even if there were some stressful moments with like onboarding and
Sure.
if anyone's gone through like a data merge, oh, that's a process. So there were some stressful moments kind of getting the new or current system ready, but they were bought in from day one to I'd much rather be doing the work of getting things ready to go so that my life down the road is easier as opposed to just slogging through kind of the old process where at the end of the day, they'd be like, well, I didn't do very much other than just like hard code tickets, and that's not very fulfilling, right? So I do think kind of the staff buy-in is really important because there will be issues like down the road if you fine tune a system or kind of full scale, change something. But if they're bought in, just in our experience, it's just gotten easier and better, and it led to better results.
For my final question, I'll take you out of the hot seat in a second. You had mentioned remaining as curious as possible.
Sure.
Can you sort of speak to how that has enabled you to find new ways of working and sort of what that has enabled at your organization, that idea of really just continuing to explore what's out there and what that has meant for the organization and your teams?
Yeah. So this is actually kind of nicely more kind of like bottom up driven as opposed to top down driven, which is nice. Like our staff is great. They're just like, hey, these 10 things were great, but these three things weren't. Like, how can we make these three things better? So a lot of the time they're making recommendations about, hey, like this, thing looks weird on the website. Can we try to fix it? Or hey, this back end tool is not quite working properly, right? Is there like a different thing that we can find or a different tool that we can leverage to do that? And that just comes with conversations and having meetings and kind of, okay, this is like a 6 month overall check-in about things like how are things going, right? So I think a credit to the SPNO staff, like they've been kind of hungry and curious to really think about how, in term like just yeah, things are going well, but just like the things that aren't going well, like how could we really kind of drive those forward and change them? The nice thing about Spectrix is you guys are always rolling out new functionality. So a lot of it can kind of just be answered just like naturally over time. But I think just having like an open line of communication that I try to have with the staff, and just really trying to think about how can we make things better, right? That just asking that question usually leads to, again, just better results and kind of more tightly fined or refined processes. So
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think, organizations can sort of become a bit stagnant because there's a lot going on, and that idea of remaining curious and being on top of what is new and what's coming, and cultivating that culture within your organization, ensuring that teams feel that they are as invested as possible to see that future success, I think is a huge credit to you and the teams that you've got there. And speaking from our side of things at Spectrix, you remaining curious to take advantage of those new opportunities. A feature is only as good as the use it is being put towards. So it's incredible to see organizations like yourselves out there taking advantage, remaining curious, and really making the most out of the technology to hopefully enhance the way in which you're working with your audiences, as well as ensuring that your team members are making the most of their time to ensure it's the best spent that it can be. So
yeah.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Giuliano. And I think that idea of continued investment and continued evaluation is really a fantastic segue into our next speaker, who is Vanessa. And Vanessa is with the wonderful Live Arts Toledo organization. And I'm going to attempt to do a few things at the same time and reshare my screen here. Here we go, Vanessa. Hopefully everyone can see that. But Vanessa does incredible work and has been with us for a number of years and has sort of gone through quite an evolution in terms of how she has engaged with us and the roles she's held at her organization. But with no further ado, I will pass it over to our great friend Vanessa of Live Arts Toledo. So, Vanessa, take us away.
Thank you, Bethany. And Giuliano, that was a great presentation. I have some follow-up questions for you that maybe we'll have time for later. Hi, everyone. So I am the Vice President and General Manager for Live Arts Toledo, which used to be the Toledo Alliance for the Performing Arts, which used to be a bunch of different organizations. So Live Arts Toledo is basically Northwest Ohio's artistic hub for live performance, cultural education, and community connection. We bring together the Toledo Symphony, Toledo Ballet, Toledo Jazz Orchestra, three Toledo Symphony Youth Orchestras, now a youth jazz orchestra, and the Toledo Symphony School of Music. We do more than 200 performances a year, and just this time last year, if I was a little bit of PTSD getting our building ready to open, we just opened a 60,000 square foot new facility, which is the home to all of our education programs and administrative offices. It's a place to gather, and it's been a really interesting year getting to know our new home. So I started with then Toledo Alliance for the Performing Arts back during the pandemic as a director of marketing. And it wasn't on my 30, 60, 90-day plan to implement a new ticketing system, but we learned that our contract was about to expire with our previous system. And so I took that as an opportunity to explore. And I knew that if we were going to go through this process, the migration, the data merge, that it needed to be a system that could do both ticketing and fundraising. That was a non-negotiable for me. I strongly believe that if your system doesn't do both of these things, you're leaving money on the table, and you can't possibly know the total progression that your patrons are having with your organization. So again, wasn't planning on doing this, but it was a great opportunity. So in 2021, we made contact with Spectrix, and we decided that we were going to move forward But at this time, we were only moving forward with ticketing. Development at the time was using eTapestry, and they weren't really interested in changing systems at that time, which was a little frustrating for me, but we'll get to that in a minute. In March of 2021, and we're looking to go live with our single ticket sales on August 1st. So it was ambitious, but it was doable. We imported 5 years of ticketing history, and we also imported all of our development data. And we did this as a little bit of foreshadowing. A, just in case we could convince them to come along, but B, we knew that we could use the data that we did have to do targeted marketing, and know our patrons better than we ever have, even though we weren't really using the fundraising side of Spectrix moving forward. So we worked with Spectrix very closely to build out flex passes, which Spectrix calls ticket subscriptions. We were previously using memberships, and we built some really great reports. And basically, the box office and Spectrix lived happily ever after. Um, we have a little bit of a love affair with Spectrix. So why wasn't development on board? Basically, as I mentioned, we had a very ambitious timeline. We were going fast and furious. Myself and the box office team, we were ready. We were like totally bought in. We were ready to do it. The development team wanted something more measured, wanted more time. There was definitely some fear of change. There was a lot of comfort and familiarity with their existing systems. And I think development was looking for perfection and just wasn't really sure. Um, Again, with an ambitious timeline like that, they were just not sure. So they weren't bought in to this change. And I will say in this last year, looking for perfection in a project of this magnitude is definitely a risk to your project and to the success of your project. So we had disparate systems. We had Spectrix, which we had the fundraising data in. We used that for ticketing. We had eTapestry for fundraising. And then we also had a third system for our education programs. So this was a lot of manual cross-referencing of systems, took a lot of staff time, a lot of resources. So along came the Bloomberg Digital Accelerator Program. So we applied for this grant in, I want to say 2023, possibly 2024. And this grant application it flew out of me. I knew exactly what we needed, and I was really excited to apply. And then I waited for about 18 months before we got the great news that we were selected. So the Bloomberg Digital Accelerator is a significant financial investment in cultural organizations' digital infrastructure. It provided the opportunity to take a step back, get alignment across our teams, across our different departments, have shared definitions and approaches to the work that we were doing. And so there were 4 focus areas for the project that we could choose from: digital archives and asset management. There were a lot of museums participating, customer relation management and ticketing, which is the one we took, digital content creation, and website development. So this just made a lot of sense for us. So together as a team, we kicked off by just making a list of what were we trying to solve. We were looking for shared processes, shared approach, shared language, standardization, and how we even just entered information into our systems, improving the trustability of our data, create standard operating procedures across the entire organization, reduce human error, and get the most from our system. And one of my most proud moments was when our team, without my prompting in any way, shape, or form, said, we want to be more customer-centric. We want our customer to come first. And that was huge, to think about the patron first rather than what we were doing every day. So we set out with the Bloomberg Digital Accelerator to identify a system, a single source of truth that could do all these things. And I kind of knew that Spectrix was going to be a front runner in this search. The one thing that was really tricky for us to find was a system that could also incorporate the education component, but I'll get to that in a minute. So, um, so this is where sort of the Spectrix plagiarism came through. We did this exercise at conference a couple years ago, led by Bethany, the League of American Orchestras conference, where we're sort of like exploring what our users are going through from their perspective. So we sat down and we made a list of users. This was just whiteboard session, putting all of our different users. Bethany, you can go to the next slide, please. All of our different users, from those of us on staff, our ticket buyers, our donors, students, parents, musicians, all of these people, board members, businesses, former and lapsed, all of the above. We still want to keep those people in our midst. So we did this exercise, and then we took a couple minutes to just say, okay, now, as a whoever, in this case, as a member of the box office, I want to know who our major donors are so that I can tailor my customer service to meet their needs. And then another example is, as a member of the education team, I want to know what families have multiple students enrolled in our programs so that we can provide the best customer service and pricing. So we did this user story exercise together. It was very enlightening. And then we used that to come up with a list of statements that we, could we say true or false, that we have clear targets for customer loyalty, that we know what concerts the students and families that are in our education programs are attending, and so on and so forth. And for most of these things, we were not able to say true at the time. So this was definitely eye-opening, and it really helped get the team aligned on what direction we were moving. And then we used these statements and our user stories to set KPIs, goals and metrics for the project. So if you can, one more slide. There we go. So our objectives were realizing efficiencies across our organization, reducing staff time, actually putting a number on what that means, the cost of the number of hours it takes to create a mailing list, the cost that we want to see that drop by, expand our program reach. We wanted to be able to know what parent had a child in ballet and maybe another in the youth orchestra, and they were a potential donor or maybe an active donor, and they were going to our Masterwork series. So we weren't really able to measure that without a lot of manual labor at the start of this project. So, we put a number on it. And then also, obviously, to increase revenue. The number of people that are involved in our programs, the retention of those people and the loyalty, and also the growth in dollars. So now we're in this implementation timeline. It was a Christmas miracle. We evaluated a bunch of systems just to make sure that Spectrix was really the one, and Spectrix was the one. We made that decision at the end. And then we actually implemented a point of sale system that integrates with Spectrix as well. In the spring, we started doing our funds and campaign mapping. So again, we had a lot of data in Spectrix, but now we needed to actually map how new data was going to come in. So we just uploaded our development data, our current development data, and we're currently awaiting a run system so that we can check and make sure that came over all great. And our goal is to go live August 31st, September 1st, for actively fundraising in Spectrix. And then our education component, fortunately, we spent a lot of time working with the Global Partnerships Department at Spectrix, who informed us of a couple different ways that we can actually get our Jackrabbit, which is our education component, get that data over into Spectrix. So even though we will have to have a separate database for the daily operations of education and enrollment, we'll still be able to pull the meat and potatoes of those transactions into Spectrix and have finally a single source of truth of what everybody is doing with our organization. So that's sort of where we are. We're very close to being fully operational, and the light is at the end of the tunnel. We can see it. There's no next slide.
That's amazing. No, thank you. So there is an next slide. Don't you worry. But I think that's a fantastic story. Slightly different than what Juliana was sharing, especially around this idea of you were working in the system, but not everybody was there. And I'm just curious, Vanessa, I know you, in your beginnings of your time with Spectrix, you were very hands-on. You were in the system
Mhm.
every day. You were talking with our support team, making it happen in the system, like many folks on this call and others that are out there, But now you're in a position of leadership in which you're guiding and leading those teams. And I'm just curious, I think so often we struggle with the idea of sort of advocating internally to make maybe not as large of a transition as you've just described that Live Arts Toledo was going through. But is there anything, and I'm going to ask it in two parts, but as a person who's in the system, how you would provide some advice to advocate internally to try and make some of these changes? I know you were trying to do that from previous positions. Yeah, just curious how, as that side of your role previously there, how would you advise others to sort of advocate internally?
So I think the reason it didn't work the first time is because I didn't take these steps that I just showed you. We didn't have a team conversation, a kickoff meeting. We didn't do those user stories. We didn't um, talk through what our common shared goals actually were at the time. I think we had them. We actually did have shared goals, but we couldn't really verbalize it. So I think going through these exercises to really get buy-in, asking the right questions, um, talking to members of other departments about what their challenges are. I think, I mean, I'll be totally upfront. I was like, we should go to Spectrix because I know Spectrix is the thing for us.
Mhm.
And that, full stop.
Yeah. Oh, I think we may have lost Vanessa for a second here. Give it just one moment to see if she's able to join us. And then if not, I will move on to our next portion. All right.
Am I
Oh,
back?
you are
Am
back.
I back now?
Hello, welcome back.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
No, that's totally fine. So yeah, so I think that you were framing it up really nicely that the piece that if you had to go back and do it again, it would be that matter of really setting the groundwork instead of sort of coming at it with a solution, instead letting the process really get you there. And I think that is having that groundwork, having alignment across your teams, that's sort of one of the beautiful parts of having everything in one system is making sure that
Mhm.
everyone's, working off the same information and data. And that sort of is what led to your success. Is that a fairly safe to make a summary
Absolutely.
there? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, I think I know where you're going with part two is that now that I'm not in the system every day as much as I want to be because it's super fun, from a leadership role, I think the biggest piece of advice I have is to trust your teams. Trust and empower your teams. They're working in the system every day. They know what's working, what's not working, and they have a good handle on your customer base. So trust those teams. Kalindi and Derek are my rock stars. I think they're on the call, but if not, no, you'll just
I'm
have to
sure they're
tell them I said
cheering for you from their desks. Absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. I'm just going to take us through a few things real quick, and then we'll get ourselves to the Q&A portion. So, just as a reminder, if you have any questions for our speakers or different topics that we've covered already, please drop those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. But I just want to take another second to thank both Giuliano and Vanessa for sharing their experiences that they've had at their home organizations. While these two organizations and the journeys that they've taken may and have looked very different, when we get to the heart of it, they were really both aiming for the same goal ultimately. How to provide the best possible experience, not just for their audiences, but for their teams back home as well. So we're really lucky to work with dozens of classical music organizations, a collection you can see here on the screen across the UK, Ireland, Canada, the United States, and now Australia and New Zealand. And working closely with these organizations have really allowed us through conversations like this and other opportunities to really understand where is the opportunity and the specific needs to this art form and to the audiences that you serve. We also remain as engaged as possible by supporting various organizations and conferences across the industry so that we can remain engaged with the current topics and the themes that are being discussed at these events. Through conversations like we've had today with both Giuliano and Vanessa and engaging in those different opportunities across the industry, the current challenges that I've got here on the screen, I imagine are not at all a surprise to anyone here. Staff turnover. It brings with it the need for high rates of recruitment and loss of institutional knowledge, not just artistically and of your organization, but of your audience members and the systems that help support you day in and day out. There's also the decline in traditional subscriptions that has been mentioned at various industry conferences. While this is not a new problem by any stretch, classical music organizations have felt this strain much more than others. There's also that growing expectations to do more with less. Now, this is not a new problem, unfortunately, but to meet the expectations of our audiences and then ultimately to find new ones and build loyalty, it requires more. And I don't want to speak for all organizations, but I doubt our budgets are ballooning to help meet that expectation to do more to help accommodate it. There's also the funding shifts that we're seeing across the board. This is all different forms of funding are really shifting and ultimately declining. And this is putting more stress and strain on our teams. And then the ever rising increase in costs. While they're increasing, the number of seats at your venue are likely remaining the same. So how are we making up for this difference? And then ultimately the decline in audience attendance. This decline is impacted by many factors, but it puts a heavier focus on where to find our next generation of attendees to support our organizations. Now, those challenges, like I said, I imagine were not new to anyone on this call, but what are we going to do to address them? When thinking about the levels of turnover you're seeing at your organizations or those expectations to do more with less, you need a unified system in place at your organization that are truly accessible to all. Both Vanessa and Giuliano mentioned this. It's not a host of various platforms that hold keys to different pieces of information and then ultimately are controlled by a small few at your organization. And when they leave, your teams can be left in the dark. We saw so clearly through Vanessa's example all of the opportunities to unlock having it all in one place and ultimately what Giuliano was trying to achieve. When we're thinking about that decline in subscriptions, attendance, and fundings, we need to simply meet those challenges by understanding our audiences. And this goes well beyond their ticket purchasing, their giving history, but also their engagement with emails, your organizations, your website, and more. This understanding allows you to see the whole and complete picture and offer something a bit more custom to meet those customers where they're at. This could be in the form of a new package offering, a really specific and curated donation ask, a timely email communication, or more. If you don't know how your customers are interacting with your full organization, you're not going to be able to design the offers best suited for them. And finally, when thinking about those heavily increased costs, you need to be making the most out of each and every interaction with your customers. Now, I'm not at all advocating that we're squeezing every penny out of every customer. It's about ensuring that the right options are being made to the right people at the right time. This can no longer be tied to simply ticket purchase information or potentially sending out emails to these constituents. It's about how you're making customized donation asks when they're making a purchase, or potentially providing the opportunity to pre-purchase parking or wine at your intermission or intervals. What are the opportunities that you can be expanding your marketing efforts from simply emails to more integrated options to ensure you're getting in front of the right folks at the right time? All of these solutions I've just quickly thrown out here may seem daunting on the surface, but if your team is in partnership with the right technology partner, feeling empowered to leverage sophisticated but approachable tools across your organization, you can continue to evaluate the needs of your audience and the available resources and commit to bringing those enhancements on board at your organization. Ultimately, you'll find that by leveraging these tools, you'll likely be freeing up more of your team's time to do what each of your team members do best. Like Giuliano said, letting the humans do what they do best on your teams because they're so dedicated and committed to these organizations. We've covered a lot here today, but before we jump into the Q&A, I wanted to just give a quick summary of our key takeaways here. to keep top of mind. To help us overcome some of these challenges that we're faced at your organizations, ensure that all departments understand the needs and behaviors of your audiences, ensuring they've got the right tools in place to do so. And you want to be meeting those audience members where they're at. This may mean breaking away from traditional setups that you've offered, but providing opportunities aligned with the understanding of where those audience members are at will increase the likelihood that they remain loyal to your organization and potentially bring others along with them. Leverage a unified system at your organization to ensure that not only do you have the complete picture of your audience member, but that your teams across departments are aligned in their ways of working and are, in effect, singing from the same song sheet. Ensure that your teams are making the most of your systems and technologies that you have internally, especially elements like automation, to help free up that team time to do the work that only they can do. And with that, I humbly turn us over to our Q&A. So if you want to just go right ahead and submit any of those questions that you have, I see we've got a few coming into the Q&A at the moment, but go ahead and take a second to drop in a few questions and I'll turn those over to our wonderful panelists. So the first one that's come in is for you, Vanessa. How does your development team find the Spectrix system now? So now that things are coming on board in your process, how are things going?
Well, we aren't fully operational yet. We've just done our data dump. So the team isn't fully using the system. We're kind of in training mode. A little bit of what Giuliano talked about. There's going to be a huge learning curve for the team. But what I will say is that they're now on board to that learning journey. They're doing a lot of experimentation with reports because there's just so much functionality and so many ways you can slice and dice data. So we actually are putting some training sessions on the calendar next week so that those of us who have been using Spectrix for a long time can share our knowledge on how we run reports and the types of reports we run, and then also just brainstorm together on what future reports we might like to have or create that we've never had before. So that's kind of exciting.
Stay tuned. We'll have to do a version 2 to come back to sort of see how everything goes and once you're fully implemented there. I wanted to come back to a question that was actually asked a little earlier on in the presentation around the segmentation and the messaging that you're leveraging. You both have painted a picture of bringing everything in-house, putting it all under one roof, and the ability to slice and dice that information, if you will, in various ways. So Vanessa or Giuliano, I'm not sure, who would like to take it first, but the idea of how are you leveraging now that you've got that data? How is it impacting the way in which you're messaging to folks, and how has that changed your approach overall?
I can start. So I mentioned, we have a lot of different facets to the organization. We have jazz, we have ballet, we have symphony, we have education, we have music education and dance education. So the segmentation is one of the most powerful tools we have because we have so many performances. I'm not about to just the unsubscribe rates would be pretty wretched. So, we look at attendance data and we segment based on people's history in attending, the same genre or the same artist even. And then we also use that segmentation since we made the decision. We've done some experiments with dot digital segmented giving campaigns. So, I'm really excited to be able to send a targeted giving campaign to just the symphony folks or just the ballet parents and make a targeted ask about the programs that they're supporting already. And then the best part too is that once they've done an action, once they've made that gift, then they come off and we don't harass them again. And we haven't been able to do that in the past. So someone would, if someone was symphony, ballet, and jazz, they get 3 different appeals from us. And then even if they made their gift, they might still get a reminder. So I'm looking forward to just all of that being automated based on their activity.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Giuliano, I'm wondering if I can sort of throw over one of our other questions here about the broad shifting landscape in the classical
Sure.
space. Yeah. So is there
Yeah.
Is there anything you can share in terms of all of the wonderful programming that your organization does and what shifts you're seeing across the landscape here?
Yeah. Well, so I think we're kind of similar to Vanessa in that the Philharmonic and Opera, like the core of what we do is orchestra opera, and more chorus stuff now too, which is great. But we also do like Harry Potter concerts and, video game concerts. We're dabbling in like anime performances now, which is kind of a different thing. So I think from like a segmentation of data perspective, we can really think of it more holistically about like, well, we know what people like specific art forms just by virtue of like what people are engaging with emails about those things or what people are buying tickets, to those different productions. So we can just be much smarter about, okay, if we have a group of people who love opera, we should start by just like, hey, like heads up, here's a 5% discount or something like that to the next opera, which we know you'll love, right? And then, ticket sales can go up that way. And that just kind of makes sense for like who we are as an organization. We just do a bunch of different stuff. So I think kind of breaking things down just based on patrons like art form preferences, I think has been smart. As far as the landscape, like we've been lucky in the sense that Sacramento has responded really well to, let's call it, the traditional stuff. So we can do like an all Beethoven concert, or we can do Puccini opera, or we can do a concert built around a Rachmaninoff, piano concerto or things like that. And we can sell, 2,000 tickets a concert, which is pretty much kind of max capacity for the venue. So we're just not really seeing that from a classical perspective. I will say though, like it was only recently that we started to add these sorts of like a Harry Potter concert or a video game concert. And while there isn't, we're not seeing very much overlap between like people who will buy ticket to La Traviata versus people who will buy tickets to Harry Potter 4. The people who come to Harry Potter 4 really enjoy the concerts, or Harry Potter 3 or 2 or 1 or whatever. They really enjoy that performance. And from that perspective, like in the next movie, there is a huge kind of retention rate. So our kind of solution to, well, what do we do with classical music is to keep like the core of what we do, the core, and do it really, really well. But then we look for these other sorts of opportunities. Like, can we again do a
Mhm.
Harry Potter concert and try to get some funding for it and make it like a legitimately sustained thing? It's great work for musicians. It's a little more kind of audience development for that specific thing. But I think also going into it, we were like, the goal is not to try to get more people who would go to Harry Potter to come to, Beethoven. It's let's get those people really excited about the Harry Potter concerts and then see if we can have that or use that to kind of grow that series. And that's just worked for us. The other thing I will say, I mean, Vanessa touched on this, we do a lot of work with the ballet. We do quite a bit of other contract work kind of around Sacramento. And even though if those are more like contracted performances, we do them at a high level. And even if we're not necessarily even selling tickets, I think people kind of really appreciate the kind of affiliation that we have with these other kind of, let's call it halo brand sort of organizations in Sacramento. So it's a little more from like an awareness kind of goodwill perspective. These sorts of community partnerships, which again are cash for the organization and work for the musicians, even if we're not like directly financially benefiting, there are massive kind of goodwill implications for us going forward, which I think makes it more likely that when we do market for a Beethoven concert or an opera, or even hey, Bocelli, we're singing with him, like more people just like know that it's a thing, which means that the universe of potential ticket buyers is just bigger as well. So.
So it's about brand. You're really building the brand and understanding that that brand can look a little different for different audiences, and that's okay. Is that sort of the
Yeah,
piece you're going
I
with? Yeah.
yeah, and I think the other thing at this point is that regardless of what we do, people just know that it's going to be good, and
Yeah.
that like if they buy a ticket, and that's taken years to build, but they know that if they buy a ticket, they can do all of get a good dinner beforehand, see a really good show, hang out afterwards, and just have a really fun night, kind of centered around like an actual high quality concert experience. And it's the ticket purchase that allows them to do all that. Right.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think there's so few opportunities that we naturally have left in our day-to-day lives to have a true live experience gathering with others. And both of your organizations are doing all the work to make those happen, as well as all of our attendees here today. Unfortunately, we're coming up on our very last question that we've got time for. And this one is for Giuliano. Was it difficult to get out of the contract opportunity that you had to move over to a different system? Or were you able to sort of go with a renewal? I know it was a unique situation with it being owned by the city, but how can you speak
Yeah.
to that a little bit?
Yeah. So try not to get like too into the weeds. I'm not sure it'd be
Sure, sure.
helpful. Basically, for us to like use Spectrix, we had to basically make a deal with the city that we would give them like a cut of like the fee revenue, which
Mhm.
really isn't that lucrative or big for us. Like, period. The city basically needed some assurances that like they would get some of the revenue back that they would lose by them not selling all the tickets on, I mean, you said Ticketmaster, on the database that they were or that we were using previously, although it's probably not. It's probably easy to tell, like, yes, that's what it was. So that was a little more like kind of a conversation with the city and kind of just
Sure.
like make it work for them and less of like a contract termination or contract non-renewal.
Understood.
And again, we're losing a little bit of money, but like it is well worth it to allow us to have like our own system that's just
Yeah,
better for patrons, better for us, more easily customizable. And like I
yeah,
said, the city could have said, no, you're stuck with us, sorry. And
yeah,
then I probably wouldn't be here. But the fact that they were so willing to just like kind of work with us to make it work for everybody,
absolutely.
that just kind of was helpful. So
Well, thank you all so much for joining us, for all of your questions, and for everything you brought to today's conversation. Hopefully, this is just the beginning of the conversation for many of your organizations in terms of how to really maximize getting in front of the right audiences to help increase revenue and really find success across the classical music space. So, thank you again for your time. Thank you again to Giuliano and Vanessa for sharing their stories with us. We hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
thanks, everyone.